On April 14th this year, the European Data Protection Board dropped its clearest so far take on blockchain with new guidelines on how personal data should be handled on-chain. If you're building in Web3 or dealing with user data in any way, this one is worth your attention. If you've worked with personal data on blockchain, you've probably wrestled with issues such as data control, erasure, consent, and cross-border transfers. For the first time, we seem to have real, concrete guidance on handling personal data on-chain. But that also means the grace period is over. Companies can't claim confusion anymore. You either get in line with GDPR or risk staying out of the European market entirely or facing fines up to 20 million euro or 4% of global turnover. But how do you implement these guidelines? I am Agnieszka, and in 2019 I co-authored Poland's first GDPR-Blockchain report. I have seen projects come to a standstill over exactly the kinds of conflicts outlined in the guidelines. Blockchain locks data in place, builds trust across the network, and keeps a permanent record without needing a central authority. It lets you automate settlement, skip the middleman, and prove ownership instantly. But those same strengths are exactly what causes clashes with the GDPR. So it got me thinking, are these EDPB guidelines realistic? Are they going to slow down blockchain development or maybe even wipe out certain blockchain technologies altogether? Let's explore these one by one.
Here's the first big issue. Blockchain runs on a decentralized network, which means no single entity has full control over how data is handled. But under Article 5 of the GDPR, someone has to be clearly responsible to make sure everything's secure and compliant. That's a problem on permissionless networks, where personal data might flow through nodes owned by totally different and anonymous entities. With no central authority, it's hard to say who's in charge. Is it the developers, miners, validators, or the users themselves? You have got a mix of people possibly handling personal data. Figuring out who counts as a controller or processor gets tricky, and without that clarity, staying GDPR compliant is a challenge. So what's the fix? The EDPB suggests setting up governance structures to make roles and responsibilities crystal clear. If you are using blockchain, you'll need policies that spell out who handles the data and how you are staying compliant. In some setups, a lead organization or consortium could take the role of controller or at least coordinate GDPR efforts across the network. Private or permissioned blockchains solve this problem because they centralize control, which makes compliance more straightforward. Developers are also encouraged to use tools like zero-knowledge proofs. These let users interact with the blockchain without revealing personal data. Transparency is also key, and so the guidelines recommend documenting exactly how data moves through the system. This might be a Sisyphean task due to blockchain's open and anonymous data flow through node synchronization and consensus algorithms. Another approach is legal agreements between participants, which can help lock in GDPR responsibilities too. All of these point in one direction. If your blockchain project involves personal data, going permissioned might be your best bet.
One of blockchain's defining characteristics is immutability, meaning once data is added, it cannot be altered or deleted. This is one of the biggest benefits of the blockchain. However, Articles 16 and 17 grant individuals the right to rectification and erasure. If someone requests to correct or delete their personal data from a blockchain, well, we have a problem. This is a huge issue in financial transactions, identity management, and medical records, where we need up-to-date and correct data. The right to be forgotten, a key GDPR principle, is ineffective in most blockchain architecture. To tackle this, the guidelines make one thing clear. Don't store personal data indirectly on-chain. Instead, use off-chain storage. Keep that data in external databases when it can be updated or deleted without touching the blockchain. Put simply, leave personal data to the traditional tech stack. It was built for that. But if you really have to store or process personal data on-chain, you will need advanced solutions. The guidelines mention hashing with salt values. A salt, as a spice, can make the same salad taste different when prepared by different cooks. salts. A salt in cryptography is just random data added to whatever you are hashing. The point is to make each hash unique, even if two people use the same input. It's mainly there to block attacks that rely on pre-computed lookup tables by making those tables way too large to be practical. The problem is that this salt also has to be managed specially. Moreover, some blockchains try garbage collection methods where outdated data is cryptographically wiped while keeping the ledger intact. These tricks can help, but also they add layers of complexity. I want you to remember this. Blockchain is a durable medium. If your encryption method ever gets cracked, you've got a problem. That risk has to be factored in. You have to put people's GDPR rights before blockchain performance. Not ideal, isn't it?
Here's the next challenge. Legal basis. Under GDPR, you need a clear legal reason to process personal data. That could be consent, a contract, or legitimate interest. But blockchain complicates that, especially on permissionless networks, where transactions are settled based on smart contracts. Getting proper user consent is tough. Consent needs to be clear, specific, informed, and revocable. But once the data is on-chain, revoking consent isn't an option, because of immutability we talked about earlier. While some argue that legitimate interest covers blockchain use, proving it doesn't override users' rights is legally difficult. So how do you fix it? The EDPB suggests building in proper consent mechanism right from the start. We need clear, active data processing consent and a way for users to withdraw that consent if they change their minds. One way to do this is with proxy identities or hash-based encryption, where the real personal data lives off-chain. That way, users can still control their data without messing up the blockchain structure. The guidelines also say you need to run impact assessments, especially if you are claiming legitimate interest. And if you are relying on a contract as your legal basis, you've still got to make sure the system respects users' rights. One standout recommendation is to design privacy-enhancing tools into the system itself. For example, smart contracts can adjust access rights on the fly. And if you are working with a private blockchain like Hyperledger Fabric, you can even set up direct channels between specific nodes. That way, only the parties with a true legal interest get to process the data. Smart contracts are a big part of why people get excited about programmable networks, but the EDPB sees them as potentially violating Article 22 of the GDPR. Yes, blockchain is known for transparency, but when a smart contract uses personal data to make decisions, people have the right to challenge those outcomes and request a human review. That's not possible in some DApps. If a decentralized system auto-approves loans or scores credit without any human involvement, that could be a GDPR breach. And it goes further. Smart contracts can also profile users based on their transaction history. That kind of profiling might, in some cases, also violate personal data rights. The guidelines make it clear. Users have to be told what decision a smart contract made about them and why. If personal data is involved, people need a way to understand what triggered that outcome. That means smart contracts should be built to show the logic behind their decisions in plain terms. For example, if someone's loan application is denied through a DeFi app, they should be able to see which data points were used and how the rules led to that decision. One proposed solution is to use hybrid smart contracts, part automated, part human reviewed, so there's always room for supervision. To be honest, I find this idea quite controversial because it undermines the key value proposition of smart contracts. The whole point in using smart contracts is to remove the human out of the process. According to EDPB, developers also need to give users the chance to request a correction or a second look if they think something's off. So basically, they are forcing DeFi to behave like a traditional bank. Please let us know your thoughts about this in the comments.
Here's another key issue. Under GDPR, truly anonymized data is outside the scope, but pseudonymized data, this is data which can still be traced back to someone. It's regulated. This is outlined in Article 26 of the GDPR. Now, blockchain usually uses pseudonymous markers like public keys or hashed IDs, but there's the catch. Just hashing the data doesn't make it anonymous. We call it pseudonymization. Why? Because it's possible to re-identify users. By combining blockchain data with off-chain information, we can sometimes reveal an identity. We have seen it before. Arkham Intelligence, for example, claims they linked Bitcoin addresses to Tesla and SpaceX. There are even reports trying to tie wallets to Elon Musk. So how do we address this? The key is making sure personal data can't be linked back to individuals or companies, not even with advanced tools. That means going beyond basic hashing and using true anonymization techniques. One powerful option is zero-knowledge proofs. They let you verify something like a transaction or an identity without ever revealing the actual data. There are also other cryptographic methods, like hashing with salt and pepper, to make reverse engineering nearly impossible. Developers are also encouraged to use differential privacy. That's where you add just enough noise to the data so patterns can't be traced back to a single person. The guidelines suggest building systems that only capture the bare minimum metadata. Enough to function, but not enough to identify anyone. Other tools like coin tabling or multi-party computation help break up transaction trails so no one can track who is doing what. Check out our previous video when we talk about Fireblocks and explain its multi-party computation module. The message from the European Data Protection Board is clear. Don't store personal data on-chain, unless there is no other way. Off-chain solutions should handle anything sensitive. That stance comes from a draft of the new guidelines, which was open for public feedback. And not surprisingly, the blockchain community isn't thrilled, especially since this could make using public blockchains for personal data nearly impossible. It's not just about slowing down new European projects, because there is also concern for existing ones that might now be seen as non-compliant. For business and enterprise use, private blockchains have already been the go-to solution for handling sensitive data. These new guidelines are only going to push that trend further. That's all for today. Remember to subscribe and stay on the blog to stay ahead.